The Ogallala Cotton Irrigation Tool is a web application that estimates the profit effects of irrigation on cotton grown under center pivots in the southern high plains. The application is based on modeled yield outcomes under dryland conditions and 12 levels of total applied irrigation during a May-September growing season. This video is meant to show how the application is used. Further details about the crop modeling and how profits are calculated can be found on the application's informational web page, or in 2 papers describing the application in Computers and Electronics in Agriculture. On the Ogallala Aquifer Project's webpage, the application can be accessed through a link under Tools on the left-hand side of the page. The application itself is divided into 3 tabs. The Read This First tab is a scrolling HTML web page, and at the top of the page are links that take you to the page's 6 sections. An introduction section, a section that describes the weather data we use to run the cotton production model, a section describing crop modeling and yield adjustment, a section describing how profit per acre is calculated, a section describing how profit is calculated over the area of a center pivot, and finally, a section that provides instructions on how to use the application. The second tab shows the modeled lint and seed yield distributions for dryland production and irrigated production under 12 irrigation levels. Because we modeled yields at 4 locations over 30-year periods, we can form distributions of seed and lint yields for dryland conditions and for each irrigation level. If you hover the mouse over any of these diagrams, pop-ups appear that show each distribution's minimum, maximum, 25th, 50th, and 75th percentiles of yield values. If you want, you can use this slider control on the upper right to adjust irrigated lint yields upwards or downwards. In the application, seed yields are calculated as a multiple of the corresponding lint yield. The default seed to lint yield ratio is 1.62, but if you want, you can adjust that ratio with the slider on the lower right. The third tab is a Calculate Profits tab where, given your yield distributions, you can calculate the corresponding profits per acre or profits over the area of a center pivot. At the bottom are sub-tabs that contain slider controls that define prices and costs. The first tab contains sliders that let you define the price you expect to get for your lint and seed yields. The second tab allows you to set various input costs per acre for both dryland and irrigated acres. You can set custom costs in the third tab, labor and repair costs in the fourth tab, miscellaneous costs in the fifth tab, pumping costs in the sixth tab, and harvest and gin costs in the seventh tab. The application's default costs for dryland and irrigated cotton were defined by estimated cotton production costs from Texas A&M's AgriLife Extension Service. By clicking these orange and green buttons on the bottom, you can reset production costs to the AgriLife Extension values. The upper area on the Calculate Profits tab holds 2 display sub-tabs. The first tab shows the bar and whisker diagrams for profits per acre. The second tab shows diagrams for profits estimated over the area of a center pivot. Once the user has selected a center pivot area and a well flow rate, the application calculates how much of the pivot area can be irrigated at the 12 irrigation levels during May 16th to September 17th, and the rest of the pivot is assumed to be in dryland production. One of 2 pivot areas, quarter section or full section, can be selected using the drop-down list in the upper right. Well flow rate can be defined using the slider control directly below the drop-down list. Once those settings are defined, the bar and whisker diagrams display the distributions of profit over the entire center pivot area based on the current profit per acre values for dryland conditions in each of the 12 irrigation levels. As before, hovering the mouse over a bar and whisker diagram causes the diagram's percentile values to be displayed. Adjusting any of the slider controls for price and cost conditions will cause these distributions and the profit per acre distributions to shift. Below each bar and whisker diagram is a center pivot diagram that shows how much of the center pivot area can be irrigated at each of the 12 irrigation levels. Hovering the mouse over these diagrams, green or orange areas shows the corresponding numbers of irrigated and dryland acres. Adjusting the well capacity rate will cause these areas to vary. This video is only meant to demonstrate the application. For more details on how model yields are generated, how profits are calculated, and the simplifying assumptions that are made in the linking weather variability, yield variability, and profit variability, the user should read the Read This First informational web page. To access the application, click the Cotton Irrigation link on the left-hand side of the Ogallala Aquifer Project's web page.